Hello, everyone. This is the first video on a series of videos where we discuss the basics of programming using Python. So before starting with programming, we're going to define computer program. So a computer program is a detailed sequence of steps, or the word we will use often as instructions. So it's a detailed sequence of instructions designed to achieve a certain goal or a task. So usually you'll start with some problem you want to solve. So you want to design a solution to this problem, and then you write the code to execute this solution, okay? So usually you will go from solution in your mind and you will design some instructions in certain programming language. So for example, here we will design the instruction to solve this problem using Python. So this is a computer program shortly. What is a computer? Most of you know computers, for sure. However, these are the four main components you will find in almost any computer. So whether it was your PC, your Mac, phone, or server. So you will find the CPU, or what you can think of as the brain of the computer. Okay, this is the part that will basically accomplish or execute or run the steps or the instructions of your program. You have also the memory and storage. Okay, you might think, what is the difference between memory and storage? Both of them store something inside them. So what is the difference? One main difference is that the memory is temporary. So whenever you lose electricity or you lose power or you turn off basically your computer, everything in the memory will be deleted. However, your storage is permanent. So the disk here is permanent, which means everything in the disk will stay there forever. So basically, your images, your data, your files, all will be stored inside a disk. And the memory will store things like opened programs, okay? Or basically we'll go over how a computer program work, and we will say that the memory, we'll see that the memory will play an important part here. Lastly, we have input-output devices, and you know many examples like mouse, keyboard, speakers, microphone, and so on. So now we will dig deeper into the CPU. The CPU has two components, the arithmetic logic unit, for short ALU, and the control unit. Anything that requires calculation in a program, okay, or comparison will be done by the ALU. Almost anything else will be done by the control unit. So, for example, anything that requires communication between input-output devices and the CPU will be done by the control unit. Okay. So how a program runs? The most necessary step to understand in how a program runs is that a program has to be moved from disk to memory. Let's take an example. Take the calculator program on your computer, for example. The calculator program is stored inside the disk. So this will be inside the disk. If you run the calculator program, it will be moved to memory or the RAM. Okay, so whenever you run a program, it is moved from the disk to the RAM. Then you have the CPU running the calculator program by communicating with the RAM. Okay, so for example, you punch in some numbers, you want to calculate the multiplication of 5 by 6, okay, on the calculator. So you use the input device is the keyboard, the input device, the keyboard, to write 5 times 6, then you click the equal sign. The CPU will perform this calculation. So the CPU, or more specifically the ALU, the arithmetic logic unit of the CPU, will perform this calculation and it will give you back the result. So the result will be written back, which is 30, will be written back to the RAM in order for you to see the result on the screen, the output device. Okay, so the CPU will write result to memory. The CPU will run one instruction at a time, which exactly what a CPU will does. Basically, will go over your program or any program you run. The program is a series of instructions. The CPU will go over them one by one and execute them. So whenever I say execute, another word for execute is run. Also, last point is input might come from the disk or from the user. So the example we've shown, the calculator example, the input is coming from the user. What is an example of input coming from the disk? We will see later in upcoming videos. Okay, so CPU instructions. CPU is an electrical circuit, okay? And it understands a language called the binary language. The binary language. So basically, the CPU operates on a signal which can be on or off, electrical signal. On is represented by 1 and off is represented by 0. Excuse me. So the series of ones and zeros, okay, can form an instruction. So for example, this series of ones and zeros form a part of a program in binary language. So if you give this to a CPU, the CPU can understand this and it can execute it. However, the binary language is too difficult for a human to understand. Okay, you can easily make mistakes when you write a program using binary. So we created something called high-level languages like Python, which is close to the human language. Okay, so basically, when you see Python code, you see many familiar English words. So this is why we call Python a high-level language, because it's closer to a human language. Okay, so basically, you write program in Python. This program eventually will be converted to binary language. Okay. So why specifically we chose Python? Because Python has simple syntax. Another word for syntax is grammar. Okay, any language you have has certain rules or grammar. So in order to write correct English sentences, you have to learn English grammar. In order to write correct Python code, you have to learn Python syntax or Python grammar, which is exactly what we are going to do in this series. So how to create a Python program? You need something called IDE, or Integrated Development Environment, which is a software you install on your own computer. An example of this is PyCharm, or another alternative is Text Editor. An example of this is VS Code. We are not going into details on how to install an IDE. You can Google how to install an IDE, a text editor, or use Jupyter Notebook as we will do in the course. This is also a third option. Okay, so let's jump into code now. So as I mentioned, we are going to be using Jupyter. So we are going to be using Jupyter Notebook. This is what Jupyter looks like. If you open it, you have cell. This is the rectangle here is called a cell, where you can write some code in it. You can go into more detail into how to install Jupyter and what are the various features you are going to have. We are going now here to jump right into Python. So the first program we are going to write is a program that achieves a simple goal. Okay, remember, program is a series of instructions that achieve a goal. The program we are going to write will simply display something on the screen. Okay, so the first thing I want to display is the text hello Python. So let's do that. To do this, we are going to use something called print. So you type print, then parentheses, open and close. Then inside the parentheses, you are going to type whatever you want to display. Okay. However, you need to put that inside the bell code. I'm going to explain every bit of details as we go on. So now I write print, and between the quotation mark inside the parentheses, whatever I want to display. So I'll write hello Python. Now, this is a complete Python program. Okay, it's very simple to execute or run this, basically to make a CPU execute this program and show you the output on the screen. You hit this button here, hello Python, and like this, you wrote your first Python program.